Malaysia for Jesus!
I am a 29-year-old woman born into a royal Malay Muslim family in the state of Johor, Malaysia, raised in a palace where tradition, religion, and reputation governed every breath I took. I was groomed from childhood to be the perfect princess, modest, devout, and unquestioning. My father is a respected royal figure, and my mother a devoted woman of faith. In short, I memorized prayers before I could even read. Yet, behind the silk curtains and golden chandeliers of our royal home, I carried a question no one dared ask. Is there more to God than what I have been taught? This is the story of how that question led me to an encounter that shook my soul, my family, and eventually, the entire nation. I was born on a humid morning in the royal residence in Johor Bahru, into a family whose name carried weight across Malaysia. My father, a respected Tengku, descended from a long line of Malay nobility, and my mother, the daughter of an Islamic scholar, was known throughout our circles for her piety and elegance. From the moment I drew my first breath, my life was scripted, every step planned, every word measured, every belief inherited. Our palace was a beautiful place, filled with marble floors that echoed when you walked, intricate woodwork imported from Indonesia, and tall windows that let in the golden Malaysian sun. To outsiders, it was paradise, but to me, it often felt like a golden cage. I was the only daughter among 3 brothers, and because of that, I was watched more closely than any of them. My mother used to say, a princess does not just represent herself, Aisyah. She represents the blood of kings and the honor of her religion. From the age of 4, I began my Quranic studies, under the guidance of a private ustaz who came to the palace every morning. By 6, I could recite long surahs from memory. By 10, I had completed my first full reading of the Quran in Arabic, an accomplishment my father celebrated with a grand feast attended by ministers and royal cousins. I was praised, kissed on the forehead, and reminded that I was a jewel of Islam. I loved my faith. I truly did. There was something beautiful about waking up before dawn, performing wudu with cold water, and standing on my prayer mat as the call to prayer echoed across the city. The discipline gave me peace. The rituals gave me purpose. And yet, something inside me always whispered that I did not fully know God. I knew about Him. I knew His names, His commandments, His mercy and His wrath. But I did not know Him personally, not in the way I longed to. This longing intensified as I grew older. By the time I was a teenager, I began asking questions that made my teachers uncomfortable. Why does God feel so far away? Why do I tremble when I pray, but feel nothing afterward? Is it possible to truly hear from God? My ustaz would smile politely and say, Princess, faith is submission, not feelings. Do not seek experiences, seek obedience. But the hunger inside me did not go away. When I turned 17, I was sent to study in the United Kingdom at a prestigious boarding school in Surrey, chosen specifically because it had a strong international reputation and a quiet, conservative atmosphere. My father believed studying abroad would polish me, prepare me for diplomatic duties, and eventually a strategic royal marriage. My mother sent me off with 3 suitcases, a private chaperone, and a long list of religious instructions. Do not eat anything haram. Do not befriend the wrong kind of girls. Do not forget your prayers. And whatever you do, Aisyah, do not let the West change you. I promised her I wouldn't, and for the first 2 years I kept that promise. I prayed 5 times a day in my dorm room, fasted during Ramadan even when my classmates didn't understand, and refused every invitation to parties, dances, and social events. I was disciplined, focused, and proud of my identity. But England was different from Malaysia in ways I had not expected. The people were quieter, the conversations deeper, the questions sharper. For the first time in my life, I met people who openly debated religion. Christians, Atheists, Hindus, Buddhists, Jews all sitting in the same classroom, all speaking with intelligence and respect. It fascinated me, and it disturbed me. One afternoon, during my second year, I was assigned a literature project with a quiet British girl named Hannah. She had soft auburn hair, kind eyes, and a small silver cross that hung delicately around her neck. I had been taught to be cautious of Christians, but Hannah was different from anything I had imagined. She didn't try to convert me. She didn't mock my hijab. She didn't even bring up religion. Yet there was a peace about her and stillness that I could not explain. One day, while we were studying in the library, I asked her something I had never asked anyone before. "Hannah, do you really believe Jesus speaks to you?" She looked up from her book, surprised, and then smiled gently. "Yes," she said. "Not always with words, but yes, he speaks to my heart." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind her that in my faith, God does not speak to ordinary people. He sends prophets, sends scriptures, and sends signs. But I didn't say anything. I simply nodded and looked away. That night, I could not sleep. Her words echoed in my mind. He speaks to my heart. I tossed and turned, irritated, unsettled, unable to silence the storm inside me. Finally, around 3 a.m., I got out of bed, performed wudu, and prayed 2 rakats of tahajjud. As I knelt on the floor, I whispered into the silence, "Ya Allah, if you are truly there, show me the truth. Whatever it is, I am not afraid." I did not realize at the time how dangerous that prayer was or how completely it would change my life. The next morning, everything seemed normal. I returned to my classes, finished my assignments, and went on with my routine. But something had shifted inside me. A door had opened that I could not close. For weeks afterward, I began noticing strange things: a verse on a poster that seemed to leap at me, a song playing in a cafe that brought tears to my eyes for no reason, a homeless man on the street who looked at me and said quietly, "God sees you, daughter." I dismissed all of it as coincidence. But coincidences began stacking on top of each other until I could no longer ignore them. By the time I returned to Malaysia for the summer holidays, I was no longer the same girl who had left. I returned home to the palace with a polite smile, kissed my mother's hand, embraced my father, and pretended that nothing had changed. I resumed my prayers, attended royal functions, posed for photographs in elegant baju kuring, and played the role of the perfect Malaysian princess. But inside, I was unraveling. At night, I would lie on my silk sheets staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with a question I dared not speak out loud. Who are you, really? I did not know it then, but the one I was searching for was already preparing to answer me. In a way no Islamic scholar, no royal advisor, and no human being could have ever predicted. The Malaysia I knew, the family I loved, the faith I had been raised in, all of it was about to be tested. Because in just a matter of months, the Jesus I had been told not to seek would begin appearing across Malaysia, to farmers, to students, to prisoners, to strangers on the street, and eventually, to me. The summer back in Johor was supposed to be a season of rest. My mother had planned everything in advance for family dinners, royal gatherings, charity events, fittings with our family tailor, and even a quiet introduction to a young man from a neighboring royal family, whom my parents considered a suitable match. I was 20 years old, polished, well-spoken, and educated abroad. In their eyes, I was ready to begin the next chapter of my life: marriage, motherhood, and the quiet dignity of royal duty. But I was not ready. Not for any of it. Something had followed me home from England, something I could not name, could not see, and could not silence. It was not a person. It was not a thought. It was a presence, a whisper, a pull, a constant, gentle tugging at my heart that refused to leave me alone. At first, I tried to bury it under routine. I prayed 5 times a day with extra devotion. I fasted on Mondays and Thursdays as the Sunnah encouraged. I read the Quran in Arabic every morning before breakfast and listened to recordings of famous Islamic scholars in the evenings. I told myself that this restlessness inside me was a spiritual test, a reminder to draw closer to Allah, to repent of any hidden sin, to purify my intentions. But the more I prayed, the louder the whisper became. It was as if a quiet voice had taken up residence somewhere deep inside my chest. And no matter how loudly I recited my prayers, that voice would not be drowned out. It was not a sinister voice. It was not frightening. In fact, it was the gentlest sound I had ever known. It carried no words, only a feeling that I was being called, that someone was waiting for me, that the door I had cracked open in England was now standing wide, and someone was standing on the other side. Tried to tell myself I was imagining things. I tried to tell myself it was the influence of Hannah, or the long flights, or the pressure of being home again. But deep down, I knew something or someone had heard the prayer I whispered that night in Surrey. Show me the truth, whatever it is. And now that truth was coming for me. The first incident happened about 3 weeks after I returned home. I had gone to my private prayer room, a small, beautifully furnished chamber off the side of my bedroom, with a hand-woven prayer mat from Mecca and a chandelier my father had brought from Istanbul. It was night. The palace was quiet. I had just finished my Isha prayer and was sitting on the mat, my hands cupped in supplication, when a sudden warmth filled the room. It was not the warmth of the tropical Malaysian air. It was different. It was alive. It moved through the room like a soft current of water, wrapping around my shoulders, settling on my chest. My eyes filled with tears before I even understood why I was crying. I tried to continue my dua, but the words would not come. My throat tightened. My hands began to tremble. And then, in the silence, I heard it. Not with my ears, with my heart. Aisyah, I love you. I froze. I had never, in my entire life, heard anything like that. In Islam, we do not say that Allah loves us the way Christians speak of God's love. We speak of His mercy, His justice, His compassion, but love, in that intimate, personal way. That kind of love was not part of my vocabulary, and yet those 4 words wrapped around me like a blanket. I felt them in every part of my being. I knew they were not coming from me. I knew they were not my imagination. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. Who said that? I whispered into the empty room. There was no answer, only that gentle warmth lingers in the air. I quickly stood up, rolled up my prayer mat, and walked out of the room, my hands shaking. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed and tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe I was tired. Maybe it was a thought I created in my own mind. Maybe it was the devil trying to deceive me. That last possibility frightened me the most. In Islam, we are taught to be cautious of spiritual experiences. They can come from Allah, from the angels, from the jinn, or from Shaitan himself. We are taught not to trust feelings, not to chase visions, not to seek anything beyond what is written. So I made a decision. I would ignore it. For the next several weeks, I threw myself into religious life with an intensity that surprised even my mother. I attended every religious lecture I could find. I memorized more Quran. I gave generously to charity. I covered myself even more modestly when I went out in public. I even told my mother I was ready to consider the marriage proposal she had been mentioning. She was thrilled. She kissed my cheek and said, "Aisyah, you have grown into such a beautiful woman of faith. Allah will reward you for your obedience." But the whisper would not leave. It came to me in the most unexpected places. In the middle of a royal banquet, while I was laughing politely with the wife of a minister, I would suddenly feel that warmth again, that gentle pull at my chest. While I was driving past the rice fields outside Johor with my driver, I would feel a presence in the back seat, as if someone were riding with me. While I was reading the Quran in the morning, certain verses would seem to glow on the page, and tears would fill my eyes for no reason I could explain. One night, I dreamt of a man. I was standing in a field of white flowers, somewhere I had never been. The sky was a strange shade of gold, and the air smelled of rain. In the distance, I saw a figure walking toward me. He wore a simple white robe. His hair was dark, his skin sun-kissed, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, they were unlike anything I had ever seen. They were not human eyes. They were eyes that knew me, every part of me, every secret, every wound, every lie I had ever told myself. He stopped a few feet from me and smiled. "Aisyah," he said, "why are you running from me?" I tried to speak, but I could not. I tried to bow, but my body would not move. I just stood there, weeping, as his presence overwhelmed me. He did not say his name. He did not need to. Somewhere in the deepest part of my soul, I already knew. I woke up gasping for air. It was 4 a.m. The room was still dark. My pillow was wet with tears. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I sat up, pulled my knees to my chest, and tried to slow my breathing. It was just a dream, I told myself. Just a dream. Just a dream. But I knew it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, the dreams continued. Always the same field. Always the same man. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he simply stood there, watching me with those eyes that saw straight through every wall I had ever built. Sometimes he would extend his hand toward me, palm open, scarred. I would always wake up just before I could touch him. I told no one. Not my mother. Not my father. Not my closest cousin. How could I? In my world, what I was experiencing was not just strange, it was dangerous. In Malaysia, for a Muslim, especially a royal Muslim, to even consider the possibility that Jesus Aisyah, as we call him, was speaking to her personally, was a violation of everything I had been taught. Aisyah was a prophet, yes, a messenger of Allah, but not God. Never. God, never someone who appeared in dreams to royal princesses in the middle of the night. And yet, he kept coming. One afternoon, I went into the city alone, something I rarely did. I had told my driver to wait for me at a cafe while I walked through a small market nearby. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to be away from the palace, away from the prayers, away from the eyes that were constantly watching me. As I walked through the narrow alleys lined with food stalls and fabric shops, I felt that familiar pull again, that gentle tug at my heart. Leading me somewhere, I followed it. It led me to a small bookshop tucked between 2 old buildings. The sign was faded, the windows dusty. I had never noticed it before, even though I had passed that street many times. Something inside me said, "Go in." So I did. The shop was quiet. An elderly Chinese man sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up briefly, nodded, and went back to his reading. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingers along the spines of old books, novels, history texts, religious commentaries. And then, at the very end of one shelf, my hand stopped. It was a small book, bound in dark blue leather. The title, embossed in faded gold letters, simply read, "The Gospel of John." My heart began to race. I had never touched a Christian book before. I had never even seen one up close. In Malaysia, Christian materials in the Malay language are restricted. To possess such a book, especially as a Muslim, could carry serious consequences. I should have walked away. I should have left the shop immediately. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up the book, paid for it quickly without looking at the old man's face, hid it in my handbag, and rushed back to my car. My hands were trembling the entire drive home. I felt as though every passing car, every traffic light, every pedestrian could somehow see what was hidden in my bag. That night, after everyone in the palace had gone to sleep, I locked the door of my bedroom, drew the curtains, and turned on a small reading lamp. I sat on the edge of my bed, the small blue book in my lap, and I stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, I opened it, and as I began to read, the very first words in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That familiar warmth filled the room once again. The whisper had become a roar, and I knew, in that moment, that my life would never be the same. I did not sleep that night. I could not. The small blue book lay open on my lap, its pages illuminated by the soft glow of my bedside lamp. The rest of the palace had long fallen silent. Even the guards outside had settled into their quiet rounds, and the only sound I could hear was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. Yet inside that small bedroom, something extraordinary was happening. Words I had been forbidden to read were entering my soul like rain falling on cracked, thirsty soil. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I read it 3 times, then 4, then 5. Each time, the words seemed to grow louder inside me, as though they were not merely written on paper, but engraved on my very bones. I had spent 20 years studying the Quran in classical Arabic, mastering its rhythm, its meter, and its eloquence. I knew what holy words felt like. I knew the weight they carried, the way they hushed a room, the way they made grown men weep. And as I read this gospel, I felt something I had never expected to feel. I felt that same weight. I kept reading. In him was life, and life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. I paused, I closed my eyes. I tried to breathe. A strange thought crossed my mind, a thought that frightened me. What if these words are also from Allah? I quickly shook it off. No, that could not be. I had been taught that the Bible had been corrupted, changed, and distorted over time. I had been taught that Christians worshipped 3 gods, that they had turned a prophet into an idol, that their scriptures could not be trusted. I had been told this by scholars I respected, by teachers I admired, by family members I loved, and yet, as I read the words on the page, I could not feel any deception. I could only feel light. I read deeper into the chapter. I read about a man named John the Baptist who came to bear witness. I read about the light that came into the world. I read about a word that became flesh and dwelt among us. And then, at one point, my eyes landed on a verse that stopped me completely. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. I read it again, and again, and then, without warning, tears began to stream down my face. I did not understand why. I did not understand what was happening inside me. I only knew that the verse felt personal, as though it had been written just for me, as though the one who inspired it had whispered, "Do you understand, Aisyah?" They did not recognize me. Will you? I closed the book quickly and pressed it to my chest. My whole body was trembling. Astaghfirullah, I whispered. Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah, I begged Allah to forgive me for what I was reading. I begged him to protect me from deception. I begged him to silence the voice in my heart that kept saying, "This is true. This is true. This is true." But the voice would not stop. I hid the little blue book under my mattress that night, beneath layers of silk sheets and embroidered pillows. It felt like hiding a body. Every time someone knocked on my door over the next few days, a maid, my mother, my younger brother, my heart leapt into my throat. I was certain they could see it on my face. I was certain that somehow the entire palace knew what I had brought into our home. But no one knew. And so, every night, after the household had gone to sleep, I would lock my door, pull out the book, and read. I read about Jesus turning water into wine at a wedding in Cana. I read about him speaking with a Samaritan woman at a well a woman society had rejected. A woman of mixed race, a woman with 5 failed marriages. He spoke to her with such tenderness, such respect, such knowledge of her pain, that I could not help but weep. I had never imagined a holy man, let alone one Muslims revered as a great prophet, speaking to a sinful woman that way. I read about him healing the nobleman's son from a distance, simply by speaking the words, "Your son will live." I read about him healing the man who had been paralyzed for 38 years, asking him gently, "Do you want to be made well?" I read about him feeding 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and a small fish. I read about him walking on water. And then, in chapter 8, I came across a story that shook me to my core. A woman caught in adultery had been dragged into a public square by religious leaders. They wanted to stone her to death. They asked Jesus what they should do. According to the law of Moses, she deserved death. According to their tradition, there was no mercy for a woman like her. And Jesus, this man, this Aisyah I had been told was just a prophet bent down, wrote something in the dirt, and then said, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." One by one, her accusers walked away. When only she remained, Jesus stood up and asked, "Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you?" She replied, "No one, Lord." And he said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." I closed the book and wept until my pillow was soaked. I had never read anything like this in my life. Never. I had been raised in a culture of judgment, of honor, of strict consequence. I had seen what happened to women in our country who were accused of adultery, the shame that destroyed their families, the punishments that ended their futures, the cruelty that crushed their souls. And here was a holy man, the holy man, perhaps, who looked at such a woman and did not condemn her. Who was this Jesus? The question began to consume me. I could no longer pray without thinking about him. I could no longer recite the Quran without comparing the words to what I was reading. I could no longer look at my mother without wondering what she would do if she knew. I felt as though I was living a double life, the obedient, smiling Malaysian princess by day, and a secret seeker of forbidden truth by night. About 2 weeks after I had brought the book home, something happened that nearly destroyed me. I had finished reading late one night and had carefully tucked the book back under my mattress. The next morning, I was called away unexpectedly to attend a charity event with my mother. I left in such a hurry that I forgot to fully smooth the sheets back into place. The corner of the book was, ever so slightly, peeking out from beneath the mattress. When I returned home that evening, I went straight to my bedroom and froze. My mother was standing in the middle of the room. Her arms were crossed. Her face was unreadable. And on the bed beside her, in plain view, lay the small blue book. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "What is this, Aisyah?" My heart stopped. Every excuse I had ever rehearsed in my mind disappeared. My mouth went dry. My knees almost buckled. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. She picked up the book, turned it over in her hands, and read the title aloud. The Gospel of John. Her voice was calm, but I could see the storm in her eyes. "Aisyah, do you know what this is?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, Mama." "Do you know what it means for you, for our family, if anyone finds this in our home?" I nodded again, my eyes filling with tears. She walked toward me slowly, holding the book in her hand. "Where did you get this?" I bought it at a market," I whispered. "In the city. I don't know why, I just wanted to understand." "Understand what?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "Understand what, Aisyah? You have studied the Quran your entire life. You know the truth. You know what Allah has revealed. What is there to understand from this book of corrupted lies?" I lowered my eyes. I did not have an answer. Or perhaps I had too many answers, and none of them were ones she would accept. She stepped closer. "Aisyah, look at me." I looked up. Her eyes were wet now, but her voice was firm. "Tell me you have not been reading this." I could not answer. "Tell me, Aisyah." Silence. She closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, I saw something I had never seen in my mother's face before, a mixture of fear, sorrow, and disbelief. "Oh, my child," she whispered. "What have you done?" She did not raise her voice. She did not call my father. She did not summon the servants. Instead, she simply walked over to my prayer mat, sat down on it, and wept. I had never seen my mother cry like that, not when my grandmother died. Not when my father had been hospitalized years ago. She wept like a woman who had lost something precious, something irreplaceable. I knelt beside her and tried to speak, but she held up her hand to stop me. "Aisyah," she said softly, "do you know what they will do if your father finds out? Do you know what the religious authorities will do? Do you know what this will mean for our family name? For your future, for everything we have built? You are a princess. You are the daughter of Tengku. You must not read such things." She paused, then added with a trembling voice, "Promise me you will never touch this book again. Promise me, Aisyah. Promise me on the soul of your grandmother." I looked down at the floor. My hands were shaking. The pull on my heart, that gentle whisper that had become a roar, had not stopped. If anything, it was louder now. I knew what the right answer was. The answer that would calm my mother, save my reputation, protect my family. I knew the words I needed to say. But when I opened my mouth, I could not say them. My mother stared at me, waiting. The silence between us stretched on for what felt like hours. And then, very slowly, she stood up. She walked to the door of my bedroom, the small blue book still clutched in her hand. Before she stepped out, she turned around one last time. "I will not tell your father," she said quietly. "Not yet, but Aisyah, if I ever see another one of these in this house, I will not protect you. Do you understand me?" I nodded. She left, closing the door softly behind her. I sat on the floor for a long time, staring at the empty spot on my bed where the book had been. I knew deep in my soul that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The book was gone, but the words inside it were not. They had been planted in my heart, and no one, not my mother, not the religious authorities, not even I, could pull them out. That night, I knelt by my bed and prayed for the first time in my life, not in Arabic, not from a memorized script, not following the prescribed motions of salat. I simply spoke, from my heart, to whoever was listening. "If you are real," I whispered through tears, "if you are truly the one who has been calling me, show me clearly. I cannot do this alone. I am afraid. I am confused. I am breaking. Please, show me who you are." I did not know it then, but that prayer would be answered in a way I could never have imagined. Because within just a few weeks, the news would begin spreading across Malaysia, quiet whispers at first, then louder reports, then undeniable testimonies. People all over the country were beginning to claim the same thing, that Jesus Isa was appearing to them, in dreams, in visions, on the streets, in the rice fields, in the prisons, in the hospitals, and he was about to appear to me. The weeks following the incident with my mother were the most painful of my life. Something had broken between us, something invisible, but very real. She no longer looked at me the same way. She no longer touched my face the way she used to. No longer kissed my forehead before bed. No longer calling me her jewel. She was polite. She was civil. She performed her duties as a mother in front of the household. But when our eyes met, I could see the grief in hers and the question she dared not ask aloud. "Have I lost you?" I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to throw my arms around her and beg her to understand. But I could not, because I no longer knew the answer. The book was gone. She had taken it that night and, I assumed, destroyed it. But the words inside that book were burning inside me with such intensity that I felt as though my chest could not contain them. Verses I had read only once would replay in my mind throughout the day, at breakfast, in the car, during prayer, in the middle of conversations. "I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Come unto me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That last one haunted me the most, because I was weary. I was exhausted from pretending, exhausted from hiding, exhausted from carrying the weight of a secret I could not even fully understand. And then, the news began. It started quietly. A cousin of mine, who lived in Kuala Lumpur, called my mother one evening and mentioned, almost in passing, that she had heard a strange story circulating among her household staff. One of her maids, a young Indonesian woman, had supposedly seen Nabi Aisyah in a dream. The maid had claimed that Jesus had spoken to her, told her that he loved her, and instructed her to follow him. My cousin laughed about it, called it foolish gossip, and warned my mother to be careful about who she hired. But I was not laughing. I was sitting across the room, pretending to read a magazine. But every word my mother repeated into the phone made my heart pound harder. A maid in Kuala Lumpur had seen the same man I had been seeing in my dreams. A few days later, another rumor reached us. A local fisherman in Terengganu had reportedly been caught in a violent storm at sea. As his boat was about to capsize, he had cried out not to Allah, not to any saint, but instinctively, in his terror, to Jesus. He claimed that a glowing figure had walked across the water, calmed the waves, and disappeared. He had returned to shore alive, weeping, telling everyone what had happened. The story was being passed from village to village. My father heard about it at the palace and dismissed it with a wave of his hand. Drunken nonsense, he said, or a man who has lost his mind from fear. But more stories began to come. A Malay teacher in Penang reported that a strange man had appeared at her doorstep one rainy night, told her things about her own life that no stranger could have known, prayed for her sick daughter, and then vanished. Her daughter, who had been suffering from a rare illness for years, was completely healed by the next morning. A young university student in Kuching had been studying late in the library when she suddenly felt someone sit down beside her. When she turned, she saw a man in white robes who looked at her and said gently, "I am the one you have been searching for." When she tried to speak, he smiled and was gone. A prisoner in Koyong prison, serving a long sentence for drug trafficking, claimed that Jesus had appeared in his cell, embraced him as he wept, and forgiven him. He had begun preaching to the other inmates, and many of them had also reported similar dreams and visions. The reports were not coming from one community. They were not coming from one race. They were coming from Malays, Chinese, Indians, Ibans, Kadazans, Baidayus. They were coming from cities, from villages, from coastal towns, from the deep jungle. They were coming from Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, animists, and atheists alike. Each story was different, but each story carried the same theme. Jesus was appearing to ordinary people all over Malaysia. The government tried to suppress the news. Religious authorities issued warnings. Newspapers were instructed not to publish anything related to these rumors. But in a country with social media, in a country where people whisper across coffee shops and prayer halls, it became impossible to silence what was happening. By the end of that month, even members of our extended royal family were quietly discussing it behind closed doors. I listened to every report with a pounding heart, because I knew that the man people were describing was the same man I had been seeing in my dreams, the same man whose words I had read in that small blue book, the same man whose presence had filled my prayer room that night and whispered, "Aside, I love you." He was not just calling me anymore, he was calling all of Malaysia. And one night, finally, he came for me. It was a Friday. I remember because the call to Jumu'ah prayer had echoed across the city earlier that day, and the men of the household had gone to the royal mosque. The women had remained home, as was our custom. After lunch, I retreated to my room, claiming I had a headache. I closed the curtains, locked the door, and laid down on my bed. I had not slept well in weeks. My body was exhausted. My mind would not stop racing. Drifted into a deep sleep almost immediately. And then I was there again. The field of white flowers. But this time, it was different. The sky was no longer gold. It was a deep, glowing white, as if the sun itself had descended and filled the entire heaven. The flowers around my feet swayed gently in a breeze I could not feel on my skin. The air smelled of something sweet, something I could not name. And in the distance, I saw him, walking toward me. But this time, I did not stand frozen. This time, my feet began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. I was running toward him, running with a desperation I had never felt before. Tears were already streaming down my face before I even reached him, and when I finally did, when I finally stood face to face with him in that field, my legs gave out. I fell to my knees. He knelt down with me. He did not say a word at first. He simply really looked at me with those eyes that knew every secret of my soul. And I knew in that moment that he had seen everything. The prayers I had recited without faith, the lies I had told myself, the longing I had buried for so many years, the fear I carried because of who my family was, the shame I felt for even being there in that field with him. He saw it all, and he loved me anyway. He reached out and gently lifted my chin. His hand was warm, real, solid. I could feel the calluses on his palm. I could see the scars on his wrists. Aisyah, he said softly, do you know who I am? I tried to answer. I tried to say his name, but I could not. My lips trembled, but no sound came out. He smiled a smile so full of tenderness that I thought my heart would shatter. I am Jesus, he said. The one you have been searching for. The one who has been searching for you. I broke, completely, utterly. I fell forward and pressed my forehead to the ground at his feet, weeping in a way I had never wept before. Years of pain, years of loneliness, years of unanswered questions came pouring out of me in great, heaving sobs. He let me cry. He did not interrupt. He simply placed his hand on my head and waited. When I finally lifted my face, I asked him through my tears, why me? Why have you come to me? I am not worthy. I am not even one of your people. I have prayed to another all my life. I do not deserve this. He smiled again, and I will never forget what he said next. Aisyah, I have come to you because I love you. I have always loved you. From before you were born. From before your name was spoken. I knit you together in your mother's womb, and I have watched every step you have taken. You are not far from me. You have never been far from me. I am not the God who waits for you to be perfect. I am the God who comes to find you exactly where you are. I wept harder. He continued, the same way I am appearing to many across this land, to fishermen, to prisoners, to mothers, to teachers, to the broken and the forgotten. I have come to you. Not because of your title, not because of your family, but because you asked me to show myself. And I am faithful. I always answer those who seek me with all their heart. I looked into his eyes. What do you want me to do? I whispered. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, follow me. But I am afraid. I cried, my family, my country, my faith. They will not understand. They will reject me. They will hate me. They might even harm me. I cannot do this. He gently took my hand. Aisyah, I will not ask you to walk a path I do not walk with you. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. Whatever you lose for my name, I will restore 100-fold. Whatever they take from you, I will give you something far greater. You are not alone. You will never be alone. He stood up slowly and helped me to my feet. He was taller than I had imagined. His presence was overwhelming, like standing inside a sun that did not burn. He looked at me one more time, smiled, and said something I will carry with me until the day I die. Tell them, Aisyah, tell them what you have seen. Tell them I am coming. I am already here. And then I woke up. I sat bolt upright in my bed, gasping for breath. My pillow was wet. My hands were trembling. The room was dark, but I could still feel his presence around me, as though he had walked back with me from the dream into the real world. My heart was so full I could hardly breathe. I knew with a certainty that no one could ever shake from me, that what I had just experienced was real. It was not a dream. It was an encounter. The God of the universe, the man whom Muslims revered as a prophet, whom Christians worshipped as Lord, had stepped into my life. He had spoken my name. He had touched my hand. He had called me to follow him. And he had given me a mission. Tell them, Aisyah, tell them what you have seen. I sat in the silence of my dark bedroom for a long time, staring at my trembling hands. I knew what this meant. I knew what telling people would cost me. I would lose my title. I would lose my family. I would lose my country. I might lose my freedom. I might even lose my life. But I also knew, with equal certainty, that I could not say no. Not to him. Not after what he had done for me. I slid out of bed, knelt down on the cold marble floor, and whispered into the darkness, not in Arabic, not in English, but in the language of my own breaking heart, the first prayer of my new life. Yes, Lord, I will follow you, whatever it costs me. I am yours. And in that moment, the Princess of Johor died, and a new daughter of the king was born. The morning after my encounter with Jesus, I woke up a different person. The world looked the same chandelier above my bed, the same silk curtains framing the window, the same view of the palace gardens, but I was not the same. Something inside me had shifted. Something had been rewritten. The Aisyah who had gone to sleep weeping the night before was gone. In her place stood a woman who had seen the face of God and could no longer pretend she had not. I did not know what to do next. I had no Bible. I had no church to attend. I had no Christian friends in Malaysia. I had no pastor to call, no mentor to guide me, no roadmap for what came next. All I had was a memory so vivid, so real, so undeniable, that it was burning inside me like a fire I could not extinguish. For the first few days, I told no one. I returned to my routine. I prayed at the appointed times, though now my prayers were quietly different, whispered to a different listener. I attended family meals. I smiled at my mother. I joked with my brothers. I posed for photographs with my father at a royal event. But inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was preparing. Because I knew what was coming. He had told me to tell them, Aisyah, tell them what you have seen. I could not disobey that command. But I also could not be reckless. I knew my country. I knew my family. I knew the laws of Malaysia regarding apostasy. In our nation, a Malay is by constitutional definition a Muslim. To leave Islam is not just a spiritual matter, it is a legal one. Apostasy can result in detention, forced rehabilitation, family separation, and in some states, even imprisonment. For a member of a royal family, the consequences are immeasurably greater. To leave Islam would not just shame me. It would shame my father. It would shame my bloodline. It would shame an entire state. I needed time. I needed wisdom. I needed direction. So I began to pray not in the way I had been taught, but in the way Jesus himself had shown me. I would lock my door at night, kneel by my bed, and simply talk to him. Lord, I do not know what to do. Show me, lead me, protect me, give me courage. And every night he answered not with audible words, but with that same gentle warmth, that same quiet peace that filled my room and reminded me that I was not alone. About 3 weeks after my encounter, I made my first decision. I had to find other believers. I had to find someone who could help me understand what had happened to me. I could not walk this path entirely in the dark. Carefully, secretly, I began searching. I could not use the palace internet. Every device in our home was monitored by the royal security team. So I bought a cheap second-hand smartphone from a small electronics shop in the city, paid in cash, and hid it inside the lining of an old handbag I rarely used. At night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I would pull out that little phone, connect to a private network, and search. I searched in English. I searched in Malay. I searched for stories of others who had encountered Jesus the way I had. And what I found astonished me. There were thousands of them, not just in Malaysia, but across the entire Muslim world: Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Indonesia, Pakistan, Algeria. Stories upon stories of Muslims, ordinary people, scholars, even imams who had encountered Jesus in dreams and visions. The accounts were strikingly similar. A field, a man in white robes, eyes that knew them completely, a voice that said, "I love you, follow me." I wept as I read them. I was not alone. I had never been alone. But finding believers in Malaysia was harder. The underground church here is real, but it is hidden, careful, and very small. Through a series of cautious online connections, encrypted messages, anonymous accounts, and one terrifying meeting in a quiet cafe, where I wore sunglasses and a plain headscarf, I eventually made contact with a woman named Sister Mei Ling. She was a Chinese, Malaysian Christian in her late 40s, who quietly served as a spiritual guide to several former Muslims who had come to faith in Jesus. The first time I met her, I was so nervous I could barely speak. I sat across from her in a small cafe in a part of the city no one in my family would ever visit. My hands clenched in my lap, my eyes constantly scanning the door. She looked at me kindly, ordered me a cup of tea, and said softly, "It's okay, sister. You don't have to be afraid. He sent you to me, didn't he?" I burst into tears. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything: the dreams, the warmth, the book, my mother, the encounter, the calling. She listened without interrupting. She did not judge me. She did not look at me with shock or pity. She simply nodded, occasionally smiled, and at one point reached across the table to squeeze my hand. When I was finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Aisyah, what you have experienced is not unusual. In the kingdom of God, He is doing this all over Malaysia, all over the world. You are part of something much bigger than yourself." She gave me a Bible that day, a small, plain one in Bahasa Malaysia, carefully wrapped in brown paper. "Hide it well," she said, "and read it slowly. Let Him speak to you through it." I hid it inside the false bottom of my jewelry box, beneath layers of pearls and gold bracelets that no one in my household would ever disturb. And every night, I read. Over the next several months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the perfect Malaysian princess attending royal functions, smiling for the cameras, fulfilling the duties expected of me. By night, I was a hidden disciple of Jesus, reading the scriptures, praying in His name, secretly meeting Sister Mei Ling whenever I could, learning what it meant to follow Christ. I grew quickly, deeply, hungrily. The Bible was unlike anything I had ever read. Every page revealed something new about who Jesus was, what He had done, what He had come to give. I read the Gospels first, then Acts, then the letters of Paul. I read about Saul of Tarsus, the persecutor who became a preacher. I read about Peter, the coward who became a rock. I read about ordinary men and women who had given everything for the name of Christ. And I knew, with growing clarity, that I would soon have to do the same. The pull to speak became unbearable. Every time I encountered another rumor of someone in Malaysia seeing Jesus, a taxi driver in Ipoh, a nurse in Kota Kinabalu, a teenage boy in Malacca, I felt His command echoing in my heart again. "Tell them, Aisyah, tell them what you have seen." But how could I, of all people, tell anyone? The answer came in the most unexpected way. About 8 months after my encounter, my father announced that I would be representing our family at a youth leadership forum in Kuala Lumpur. It was a major event attended by university students, young professionals, members of the media, and several international guests. I was expected to give a short speech on the role of young women in preserving Malaysian culture and faith. The speech had already been written for me by one of my father's advisors. All I had to do was deliver it. I agreed. But I knew, the moment my father told me about the event, what I was going to do. The night before the forum, I did not sleep. I sat up in my room, the carefully prepared speech in one hand, my Bible in the other. I prayed for hours. Lord, am I really going to do this? Am I really ready? What if they harm me? What if they harm my family? What if I lose everything? And in the silence of that long, sleepless night, I felt his presence again. That same warmth, that same peace, that same voice in my heart whispered, I am with you. I will never leave you. Tell them. The next morning, I dressed carefully a soft cream-colored bajik earring, a matching tudung, simple pearl earrings my mother had given me when I turned 16. I looked, for all the world, like the perfect Malaysian princess. I kissed my mother on the cheek before I left. I held her for a moment longer than usual. I did not know if I would ever come home again. The forum was held in a large hotel ballroom in Kuala Lumpur. There were perhaps 800 people in the audience. Cameras lined the back of the room. Several of the country's major news outlets were present. I was scheduled to speak for 15 minutes. When my name was called, I walked to the podium with the prepared speech in my hand. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. I placed the speech on the lectern. I looked out at the crowd. And then, very calmly, I folded the speech and set it aside. A small ripple went through the audience. The moderator looked at me with concern. I took a deep breath, gripped the edges of the podium, and began to speak not from the prepared text, but from my heart. Assalamu alaikum, I began. My name is Tengku Nur Aisyah Binti Sulaiman. I am a daughter of Johor. I am a daughter of this land. And today, I want to share with you something that has changed my life forever. The room was silent. For many years, I lived as a faithful Muslim. I prayed 5 times a day. I memorized the Quran. I followed every rule I was taught. But for all my devotion, I always felt that something was missing. A distance I could not close. A question I could not answer. I could see people in the audience leaning forward. Cameras were rolling. The moderator was beginning to look nervous. Then, several months ago, I had an experience I cannot explain in human words. I was visited in a dream, but more real than any dream I have ever had, by a man who told me he had been searching for me my entire life. He told me he loved me. He told me his name. I paused. The whole room seemed to be holding its breath. His name was Jesus. A gasp went through the audience. And I am here today, I continued, my voice steady now, to tell you that the same Jesus who appeared to me is appearing to thousands of people across Malaysia right now. To fishermen, to teachers, to prisoners, to students, to the broken and the forgotten. He is not a stranger to our nation. He is here, and he is calling all of us, Malay, Chinese, Indian, every race, every background, to come to him. The moderator stood up, frantically signaling for me to stop. Security personnel began moving toward the stage. I had perhaps 30 seconds left. Whatever happens to me after today, I said quickly, my voice trembling but clear, I want every person watching to know Jesus is real. He loves you. He is calling your name. Do not be afraid to answer him. Two security guards reached the podium. One of them grabbed my arm firmly. The microphone was cut off. The audience was in chaos, some shouting, some weeping, some sitting in stunned silence. Cameras were still rolling. Phones were already recording. I was led off the stage in front of 800 people and an entire watching nation. But in my heart, I was at peace. I had obeyed him. I had told them. And whatever came next, I knew I would not face it alone. The hours after my speech were a blur. I was escorted from the ballroom by 2 security guards, hurried through the back corridor of the hotel, and placed into a black SUV with tinted windows. No one spoke to me. No one explained where I was being taken. I sat in the back seat clutching my handbag, the same handbag that contained my hidden phone and a small folded card with Sister Emmy Eiling's number on it, and I prayed silently the entire way. Lord, be with me. Lord, do not leave me. Lord, give me strength. Over and over, like a heartbeat. The SUV did not take me to a police station. It did not take me to a religious authority. It took me, instead, straight back to the palace in Johor, a 4-hour drive in complete silence. By the time we arrived, the sun had already set. The palace gates opened slowly. The car pulled into the inner courtyard, and the moment I stepped out, I knew everything had already changed. My mother was standing at the entrance of the palace, her hands clasped in front of her. Her face was pale. Her eyes were swollen. She had been crying for hours. Behind her stood my father, dressed in his formal attire, his expression unreadable. I had never, in my entire life, seen him look at me the way he looked at me that night. He did not speak to me. He simply turned and walked into the house. My mother whispered to me as I passed, "Aisyah, what have you done?" I had no answer. I was taken to my room and told not to come out. The door was locked from the outside. My phones, both the official one and the secret one I had hidden, were confiscated. My laptop was taken. My access to the internet was cut. I was, in every practical sense, a prisoner inside my own home. I spent the next 3 days in that room. My meals were brought to me by a single trusted maid who refused to look me in the eye. She would set the tray down silently, turn, and leave without a word. I was not allowed visitors. My brothers did not come to see me. My mother did not come to see me. My father certainly did not come to see me. The entire household had been instructed to treat me as though I no longer existed. But I was not alone. In that small room, behind a locked door, with no Bible, no phone, no human contact, I encountered the presence of Jesus more deeply than I ever had before. He filled that room. He sat with me on my bed. He walked with me as I paced the floor. He whispered to me through the silence, "I am here, I am here, I am here." And I knew, with a certainty no prison wall could shake, that I was the freest I had ever been. On the 4th day, the door opened. My father stood in the doorway. He looked older than I had ever seen him, as though he had aged 10 years in 3 days. He stepped into the room slowly, closed the door behind him, and sat down on the chair across from my bed. For a long time he did not speak. Then, finally, in a quiet voice, he said, "Aisyah, do you understand what you have done to this family?" I lowered my eyes. "Yes, Father." "Do you understand what you have done to me?" "Yes, Father." He shook his head slowly. "The video has been viewed millions of times. Millions, Aisyah. They have tried to remove it. They cannot. It is everywhere. On every social media platform. In every country. People are calling it a miracle. People are calling it madness. The religious authorities are demanding answers. The government is demanding answers. And I have no answers to give them." I lifted my eyes to his. "Father, He held up his hand. "Do not speak yet." He stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the garden for a long moment. Then he said, without turning around, "Tell me, Aisyah, is it true, what you say? Did you really see him?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Father, I really saw him. He was silent, and he really spoke to me," I continued softly. "He told me he loved me. He told me to follow him. He told me to tell others. I could not disobey him, Father. I could not." My father did not turn around, but I saw his shoulders begin to tremble. "Do you know," he said quietly, "that I have been receiving phone calls from across the country for 3 days, from people I do not know, from people I will never meet. They are calling to tell me that they, too, have seen him, that what you said on that stage gave them the courage to admit it for the first time. Princes, ministers, scholars, imams, all of them whispered it to me. as though they had been carrying a secret they could no longer hold. I sat in stunned silence. He turned around slowly. There were tears in his eyes. Aisyah, I do not know what to believe. I have spent my entire life as a faithful Muslim. I have raised you to be the same. What you have done, what you are saying goes against everything our family stands for, everything our nation stands for. I should be furious with you. I should disown you. I should hand you over to the authorities. He paused. But I cannot. I looked up at him, my eyes filling with tears. You are my daughter, he whispered, and whatever I think of what you have done, I cannot stop loving you. He walked over to my bed, sat down beside me, and for the first time in my entire adult life, my father pulled me into his arms and held me. I wept into his shoulder like a little girl. He did not say anything. He just held me. And in that moment, I felt the love of God flowing through my earthly father in a way I had never experienced before. When he finally let go, he wiped his eyes and said, I cannot keep you here. The pressure is too great. The authorities want to bring you in. The religious council is demanding a public retraction. If I keep you in Malaysia, I cannot guarantee your safety. He took my hand. You must leave, Aisyah, tonight. I stared at him in disbelief. I have arranged everything, he said quietly. A trusted family friend will take you across the border into Singapore. From there, you will fly to a country where you will be safe. I cannot tell you where. I cannot know where. The less I know, the safer you will be. Father, do not argue with me, Aisyah. This is the only way I can protect you, and it is the only way I can protect what little is left of our family's name. He pressed something into my hand. It was a small wooden box. Inside it was a stack of cash, several documents, and a tiny gold pendant, a delicate gold cross. I gasped. He smiled softly. Your mother put it there. She does not want you to know that she did, but she wants you to have it. She has been weeping for 3 days, Aisyah, not because she hates you, because she loves you, because she is afraid for you. I clutched the pendant to my chest, sobbing. Will I ever see you again? I whispered. He kissed my forehead. That is in God's hands now, not mine. That night, I left the palace forever. I was driven across the border under the cover of darkness. I crossed into Singapore with nothing but a small suitcase, the wooden box my father had given me, and the gold cross around my neck. From Singapore, I boarded a plane to a country I will not name in this story, a country where I have lived ever since, under a different name, in a community of believers who have welcomed me as family. That was several years ago now. In the time since I left, much has happened. The video of my speech has been viewed by tens of millions of people around the world. It has been translated into dozens of languages. It has been shared in homes, in churches, in underground gatherings, in places where the name of Jesus must still be whispered. I have received thousands of messages from Malaysians, from Muslims across the world, from people of every background telling me that my testimony gave them the courage to seek Him for themselves, and the movement in Malaysia has not stopped. If anything, it has grown. The reports continue. People across the country, across all of Southeast Asia, in fact, continue to encounter Jesus in dreams, in visions, in the most unexpected places. House churches have multiplied quietly. Underground gatherings are happening in cities and villages alike. Even some members of my own extended family, I have heard through trusted channels, have begun to seek Him in secret. Sister Emmy Eiling, by God's grace, is still safe and still serving. We exchange messages from time to time, always carefully, always with gratitude. She tells me that the harvest in Malaysia has only just begun. My mother and I have spoken twice in the year since I left, both times briefly, both times in tears. She has not become a believer, but she no longer rejects me. She told me, the last time we spoke, that she prays for me every night. I do not know your God, Aisyah, she said, but I know He is taking care of you. I can hear it in your voice. You sound free, free. That is the word I would use to describe my life now. I have lost my title. I have lost my country. I have lost the palace, the wealth, the privilege, the public respect. I have lost the future that was planned for me from the moment I was born. By every standard the world measures by, I have lost everything. But I have gained him, and he is worth more than every kingdom on this earth combined. When people ask me now if I have any regrets, my answer is always the same: no, not one. Because I was once a princess of an earthly kingdom, and now I am a daughter of the King of Kings. I once lived in a golden cage, and now I live in the freedom of his love. I was once searching in the dark for a God I could not find, and the moment I cried out to him in honest desperation, he came running across the field to find me. That is the Jesus I know. That is Jesus appearing across Malaysia today. That is Jesus I will spend the rest of my life telling the world about. If you are watching this story wherever you are, whatever your background, whatever your religion, whatever your past, I want you to hear me say this one thing. The same words he said to me in that field of white flowers. I love you. I have always loved you. I am not far from you. I am not waiting for you to be perfect. I am the God who comes to find you exactly where you are. He found me in a palace. He found a fisherman in a storm. He found a prisoner in a cell. He found a teacher on her doorstep. He found a student in a library. He will find you too. All you have to do is whisper the same prayer I whispered all those years ago in the silence of my royal bedroom. Lord, if you are real, show me. I promise you he will answer. He always does.